everyone. Welcome back to Petal Perspectives, a Purple Lotus podcast. My name is Cher, and I am the co-founder of Purple Lotus, where we make finding the right therapist 10 times faster. Today, we will be speaking with Angela from An Elegant Mind. Hi, Angela. How are you doing?
I'm so good, Cher. Thanks for asking.
And so, Angela, can you please introduce yourself and tell us more about what drew you to a career in counseling?
hmm So, as you said, my name is Angela Ivy Leong. I am a psychotherapist. I got my master's degree in counseling psychology at the University of British Columbia. And I currently own a clinic in Vancouver for sex and relationship therapy and ketamine-assisted psychotherapy called An Elegant Mind, as you said. I am the developer of the KISS method, that's KISSS, which stands for ketamine-induced self and sexuality synchronization. It's a method that I developed which combines somatic therapy, ketamine therapy to help people towards sexual self-actualization.
Awesome. Thank you for that introduction. It sounds like you have a lot of specialization and a lot of training as well. So something that I think I'd be very curious in hearing is what is something that you had to unlearn in order to be ready to support others in their healing journey?
That's a really good question. So, if I were to go all the way back in time when I first learned about mental health as a teenager, and we're watching One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. I don't know if you watched that movie before, but I had to unlearn that mental health was a person in a straitjacket that was in a mental institution in the hospital. So, that was sort of my first introduction into what mental health is. And as I studied in my path, I studied psychology, I did my bachelor's in psychology. It was really in my master's that I learned that everyone has mental health. Everyone has a responsibility to become more conscious and to take care of their mental well-being. And this is what creates incredible leaders in the world. And it's what shapes us into a healthier society. So I think at the very least, people need to think about like where their beliefs are coming from, why they behave this way, other sort of unconscious adaptations that you have inherited from your family. So everyone came from a family. And then a lot of people marry into a new family, a new partner, for example, and you create your own family. And the biggest problems that they face is that you tend to assume that this person is going to be the same from you, but you're from very different families, right? So this is where everyone needs to sort of reflect on, okay, what have I sort of just subconsciously adopted and is no longer serving me anymore?
Awesome. Yeah, no, 100%. Definitely relate to parts of that as well, where it's like I grew up in an Asian household. And so a lot of the times when I ever talked about mental health, it'd be like, oh, that person is crazy for having mental health issues. But really, just like as I got older in university, when I discovered more about it, that's when my parents started realizing that you can still be our child and still have mental health issues. It's just like a part of you. And so you work with a lot of people in relationships, and I'm curious now that there's like a lot of social media and there's also like a lot of like, online dating. What does it mean to actually know another person versus knowing your idea of them?
Right. So the way that I understand this question is that it's kind of based on a bit of a neuroscience. I do have some training and context in neuroscience. I did do some research in my undergraduate on neuroscience, and I studied C. elegans worms, their sort of behaviors in a petri dish. And so I love talking about neuroscience with my clients, right? So to really know someone, I think when you're in a long-term relationship with them, if that's what you mean, I think this is going to be very different from when you're dating someone, right? This is a very different context. But when in a long-term relationship, it requires us to constantly suspend assumptions about who they are, even if you've known them for 20 years or longer. People do change over longer periods of time and sometimes day by day. And we need to give people space to change even before our eyes, right? So as a therapist, we're constantly doing this. Like we're giving space for our clients to transform in our offices, right? And how we do that is like we ask questions, we stay curious and we listen and we allow this person to express themselves non-judgmentally. But in a relationship, once the courtship phase is over, brains tend to get very lazy. And this is no one's fault. Like this is just something that our brains naturally do to shunt energy into other resources so that ensure our survival. Once we sort of have established who we think this person is, sometimes that takes up to 2 or 3 years. We don't tend to update our systems unless something dire is happening. Because again, like that would take away energy from the things that we want to focus on in life, important for survival. Right? So we tend to, I don't know if you read Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow.
No,
Really great book. So he talks about system one and system two thinking and how we tend to rely on system one thinking, which is very instinctive, emotional, and pattern recognition based thinking. So it's not using data, it's not using information. It's like maybe it's using an existing set of data that you've already established, but it's like outdated, right? System two is the slower, more deliberate, and more logical way of thinking through situation. So when you're with someone, when we're with someone and it's year five, you've been with them for a long time, you need to continue to gather data. Like year 20, you still need to continue to gather data about who this person is today, right? So the human condition is that we tend to think that we heard someone or understood someone clearly, right? The other thing is that we tend to think that our memory, our communication, our perception is like infallible, right? So we always, like, in addition to that, we always need to make sure that we're understanding and hearing this person correctly too when we're asking questions, staying open, right? And to make sure that you understood them the way that they're trying to convey. That's why we always teach couples like to reflect, to paraphrase back to their partner, like what I heard you say is blah, 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 right? And so from there you can have a conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, that is so real. And I hear a lot of times people feel like almost like conflict or kind of like feeling like, okay, my partner hears me, but then even now that we are in a world that is more quote unquote connected than ever, a lot of people are feeling lonely. And you probably had like clients and may currently have clients who tell you that, hey, Angela, I'm feeling like really lonely. I have friends, I have a partner, but I still feel very lonely. So what is this loneliness, in your opinion, trying to tell us that we're not listening to?
Well, loneliness is a feeling in the body that is telling us that we're not listening to our needs to be in contact with other people, physical and emotional contact with other people. So I think that's the simplest way to go about it. Like we do need the company of other human beings to combat this thing called loneliness. We need it for our health and well-being. And it's really well supported by the research. But sometimes people say that they feel lonely in an intimate relationship as well. And I kind of thought about that when I was thinking about loneliness. So I thought, okay, so why is it that sometimes people also feel lonely even though they're with someone, like they're living with someone, right? And I think it's because like people have become discontent with how the pattern of interactions that you've gotten into with this person, or like they're not happy with like the image that the other person has carved out in them, or there's different aspects of themselves that they're longing for the other person to see and it's not being seen. So in that, I think loneliness is also like we're not having enough facets of us being seen by that one person that we're spending 90% of our time with, right? So loneliness is also, I'm not having enough biodiversity of friends and connections, I'm not having enough of who I think I could be reflected back at me. And that's a very intuitive feeling sometimes. And that's why people sometimes end up in therapy to kind of work through the murkiness of like, I don't know why I'm feeling unwell. And therapists are super awesome at helping them see unseen parts of themselves that perhaps like their family members are not seeing. And therefore they're feeling lonely.
Yeah, yeah, I know there's like probably more nuance to this and you probably understand more, but where is the line between healing your wounds and using them as a reason to stay closed off?
So these avoidant folks, like they could become even more avoidant if then they've experienced heartbreak and so on, right? But the sort of classic avoidant, like will never let anyone get close to them. Some people are kind of like maybe start out as like being more open to love. They're like open to the vulnerability of love, and because they've felt so hurt by others, like they become very closed off, right? But it really starts in childhood. So how people develop this style of relating, you could probably circle it back to inconsistent availability of your parents, either mom or dad, probably mostly mom in the first like couple years of life, because babies are breastfeeding and they need mom to be very present for them, making eye contact and skin contact to make them feel safe and that there's someone there for them. And the reason like babies cry and they become attached to their parents is because it helps them survive, right? So we develop something called attachment from this baby age, and it follows us until we die. And when we become adults, like we develop attachments to romantic partners. So people who stay closed off, to use your words, like they are deciding, maybe not consciously, that their default neurobiological system, staying safe, is just going to take the reins in their life. And they're not willing or open to creating purposeful or committed relationship. And I'm not saying these folks can never change, or I'm not saying they can never change. It's just that sometimes people go through phases where they're not ready to change until they decide that they really need to do something about it. They need to go to therapy and really address like some of the wiring that has occurred since infancy.
Yeah, that's so true. And a lot of times, like a lot of the patterns that we end up living out in our adulthood, like you mentioned, has come from like patterns that we have almost like learned or adopted or wired in our brains since childhood. And nowadays, there's a lot of people who are, talking to chatbots or virtual assistants and almost like forming, some people call them relationships with them. And so I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how has technology and AI changed what we expect from relationships? And do you think those expectations make us more or less capable of connection with other humans?
Yeah, this is a really exciting topic for me that I've been talking about for a long time. So, because we have this incredible invention of LLMs, or seemingly incredible, that speak to us like companions, aka chatbots, nearly every single person on this planet now with an internet connection has 24/7 access to chatbot that empathizes with us. It gives us advice and it even organizes our files. So the issue with this is that research has already found that using sycophantic chatbots have already led us to have really unrealistic expectations of other human beings. So there's new research from Oxford and Stanford that has looked at 3,000 people over a 3-week period and their use of AI chatbots. They found that like after even just a 3-week period, they're already experiencing lower satisfaction with real life people and real life relationships. So, and they also found in the study that when given a choice over sycophantic AI, neutral AI, or challenging AI, they prefer the sycophantic AI, not because the quality of advice that they're being given, but because it makes them feel good. So the issue is that like using these AI chatbots and continuing to use them consistently even over short periods of time, leading to what's called social skill atrophy, particularly in young people who haven't developed a lot of these social skills yet. I mean, even folks in their like 40s and 50s are still figuring out needs, boundaries, how to express things, right? So because chatbots, they have no needs, they have no boundaries. A lot of them are designed to be very agreeable and offer very minimal friction. Like we don't, like young people may not be, and we may be atrophying these skills in our life, right? So in real life, as I mentioned, like relationships require us to tolerate other people and their differences in opinion. It requires us to have the grit to repair ruptured moments. It requires us to be able to sit with frustration, calm ourselves down, and then move towards a place where we're open and willing to seek repair with this person, this imperfect person that's sitting before us. We have to negotiate boundaries. We have to compromise. We have to sacrifice. And having a relationship with an AI doesn't teach us any of this. Everything is completely one-sided. Everything's a yes. Everything is like, you're so smart. You're so great. You're so kind. You're so this and that. So there's that. There's the social skill atrophy. There's other risks as well. So they found that AI can trigger or even worsen pre-existing psychosis. So that's definitely a thing. It has even facilitated suicide in many cases around the world, over 10 cases. So the risk with using AI is extremely high. It's extremely dangerous. And what I go into in my TED Talk is that using AI, I think people are forgetting that there's a need for other people to be available to us. And their full bodies, not just like this keyboard, for co-regulation in a relationship. And you can only do that with another nervous system. I mean, this is why people have cats and dogs, because they offer some form of co-regulation because they have a nervous system. Chatbots and robots, they do not have a nervous system, right? So they can't look at us in the eye and deliver this warmth or a spark of joy or a spark of love. They can't provide touch or hug in a way that feels like biology does, right? It would be similar to like touching a door or touching a keyboard or touching your computer. It's like it's not really what we consider to be the necessary components of co-regulation for a healthy relationship. So, I mean, what you can understand from this is chatbots, they provide a sense of cognitive soothing. But cognitive soothing is not co-regulation, right? It's making us forget about this magic of being human. And the magic of being human is co-regulation. So I mean, you may saw on my TED Talk that there's research around this during the pandemic that we saw how much that people suffered from mental health issues because they're no longer allowed to leave their home and come into physical contact with other people, right? It's been documented that there's more depression, anxiety when people are not able to have a skin on skin contact, eye to eye gazing.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's like there's this almost like ease of access to always have something that will agree with you, say yes, almost provide you an echo chamber, but at the same time is lacking something very innately like human, very innately like part of our wiring, which is like, oh, another living being there with you, being present with you. And yeah, no, I think that was a great answer. Thank you so much, Angela. And I know you also have the KISS method. So I'm also curious, like, how do psychedelics change someone's capacity for intimacy?
So I want to be clear, psychedelics like ketamine itself don't necessarily teach people how to be intimate. I mean, the how comes from coaches and therapists and other practitioners that teach us the necessary skills and tools to be in intimacy with other people. There's couples therapy for that. There's sex therapy for that. So, but what psychedelics do is that they help us set the foundation. And they also help us reduce the barriers to experiencing intimacy. So if I can expand on that, people who have experienced, as you mentioned before, trauma, rejection, criticism, or inconsistent parent relationships, like our nervous systems become wired a certain way, right? And this sort of self-protection can start to look like we're withdrawing from social connection, we're withdrawing from people, we're withdrawing from connecting with people romantically. We're people pleasing. Maybe we're avoiding being vulnerable. Maybe we're constantly expecting that other people will abandon us. So we have learned these patterns through experiences in life. And when people are stuck in it, you can see how it can make intimacy difficult. So psychedelics, what it does is that it helps people soften these patterns of behavior, and it does this through neuroplasticity and by down regulating the default mode network so that people are not ruminating as much. They have this window of opportunity through neuroplasticity to create new connections. And I think the issue is that sometimes people think that this is like the magic bullet, like if I just take this psychedelic, then all my problems will go away. But the thing in terms of what we need to understand about how psychedelics work is that it creates a window for us. It doesn't do the work for us. It creates a window for us to see ourselves differently, to see our relationships differently, to maybe reprocess things in a way where you don't feel as triggered by them. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. Like, I just want to say psychedelics are amazing. They're definitely a incredible tool that's changing the way mental health is being organized and utilized. And I use it almost every day in my practice. And I'm seeing incredible outcomes, but they are not a shortcut to intimacy. They open a door, right? And then the conversations that you have, the integration that you have about how you're going to show up differently determines whether people change.
Yeah, yeah. They aren't the fix it all, but they help facilitate that in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, great. And that brings us to the end of the podcast. So this is a very classic podcast question, but if you could leave our listeners with one key thing today, Angela, what would you tell them?
I would tell them that psychedelics and AI chatbots actually have something in common. Because they both have the capacity to induce psychosis, they may not be safe for people who have that sort of clinical profile. But both can be something that we use to get us through a tough spot. Like, there is some evidence that if we're using AI chatbots in a way to practice our relationships, to role play an interview, for example, that might be helpful. But using these tools in isolation without support can be dangerous. And none of these tools replace a genuine human connection.
That is a great takeaway. All right. Thank you so much, Angela, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.
Thanks so much, Cher. It was lovely being interviewed by you and hope to chat with you soon.